All right, welcome to Spoiler Talk for Touch the Night. I think I want to start because I get the feeling I know what you were hinting at, kind of right around after the synopsis.
Hmm.
So I'm going to let you get into that because that may shape how we talk about other things.
So there's definitely a theme throughout the story of there's some are more subtle than others, but people acting in a way that they usually wouldn't. And I think the big example is the cashier at the dollar store almost seems possessed, talking to the moms about like the ritual thing and all that. So
Mhm.
that's obviously someone who is supernaturally possessed saying something. But there were also several other characters, and some of them are more subtle than others, who were doing stuff that they usually wouldn't. And so the reason I wanted to bring it up earlier, and then I realized probably not a good, well, Livius, you basically told me it wasn't a good idea, on the regular thing, was that I want to know if you thought that the kids going off on the cashier in the gas station and fighting him was part of that, people acting out the way they wouldn't, or if it was just Alonzo got pushed past his breaking point.
I like your thought. I really do. I don't think that about the kids,
Right.
and there's a couple of reasons because the kids, they kind of sounded like they were, and really again, Alonzo, like he was always pushing
Mm-hmm.
for more and more sordid shit, but there's I don't know, and this is, and again, I could be wrong, but I feel like there's a general writing rule that your protagonists can't be affected.
Oh, by the thing.
Yeah, you know what I mean, and obviously it's not hard and fast, but I never think of the protagonists that they have to be the ones that see things for what they are.
Yeah,
I
that's a good
think in
point.
most stories. But what was interesting about that is when you said that, what that made me think about was Jasper, Josh's
Oh
dad.
yeah. Yeah.
And if he, well, and not when he kills his mother-in-law, but the whole like I'm gonna watch the World Series, the kid's an asshole. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
before that, because obviously he's affected at a certain point when he starts just murdering family members, right? But
Yeah.
before that, and now I'm trying to think if there were any other characters. And again, I mean, there's the kid at the McDonald's that Mary winds up throwing the coffee on, who
Yep.
obviously, like anybody who talks about the family or mother, clearly is possessed, but in kind of an interesting way, because this really could have become the whole town is against them too. But it's like
Right.
they're possessed momentarily, and then they have no idea what happened. Like they come out of it in this fugue state, sort of. So
Yeah, like they're just vessels. And I wondered, like, I wondered if that was going to be, like you said, more of, because it gave me the feeling that the whatever evil thing is going on has tendrils that reach out beyond the farm. But there wasn't really, I don't feel like there was, like you were kind of grasping for another example, there wasn't enough of it to kind of establish rules for it. Like it just happened a few times, but it was enough to make me wonder, like how much of any person's actions in this were their own. So
yeah. But okay. So I was trying to think through, like I said, over the course of the last 20 minutes or whatever. Like the sheriff, for example, I don't. I don't necessarily know that he's affected.
no, he's just, he's like a familiar to
Yep.
the family,
Yeah.
kind of.
He's trying to buy his way
Yeah,
into
he's a bootlicker.
whatever they're. Yeah. So it's interesting, and you're right. There aren't rules, which in some ways I would have loved to have seen what the whole skeleton of this looked like. But I think in this book it worked without that.
No, totally. Yeah, and that's something probably I will talk about in the wrap up is like not going too far into things that we don't need to know enough about, too much about.
Hmm?
But yeah, I think he used it just as much as he needed to be effective, and also just to kind of like throw you off your balance. Like they had an actual gravitational oddity at the farm, but like he messed with other characters throughout the book just to kind of leave you on uncertain footing, which I thought was cool.
Yeah. Another taboo in this. I mean, not that there's not a bunch of them in this book. Killing kids, man. That's. I mean, I know I'm skipping to the end, right? But you definitely don't expect a 12-year-old to be hacked up by his best friend under the pressure of.
Yeah.
So, when you say keeping you off your footing, there are a number of things that happen in this book that I was like, whoa, that's not something you see very often. I'm not put off by it at all. I think it's probably a brave choice, because I think that alone keeps you from being mass market. Like, you're not, you know what I mean? There going to be no starred Kirkus reviews for this or whatever. And that enough, I think, is probably enough to keep you out of that. So I applaud him for writing the story he wanted to write. But it's really weird, because I thought for sure this book was going to have a clean and happy ending with the mothers and the kids. And it's weird, because I finished it just earlier today, and I was sitting in a McDonald's parking lot eating breakfast. I'm trying to finish this before I had to go to work. And, I'm looking, I go, man, I think there's like 10 pages left. Like, there's a lot of shit to wrap up in here. And yeah, that didn't, no, not really.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, I'll be 100% honest. I prefer this ending, because I know that when you have a book that's got so little time, or a story, a movie, whatever it happens to be, that has so little time to resolve all the loose ends, I almost prefer that, like, the evil wins, because that's almost the only satisfying. Like, I can't think of a happy ending that would not have at least somehow pissed me off.
Yeah, you have a point. I don't know. I didn't try to think what options there were.
Yeah.
I took the story as it was told to me, and I'm satisfied with the ending. I don't want to make it sound like I'm not. I'm a little surprised, I guess. Is
Oh yeah.
I was like, okay, all right, just lost Joshua guy, or I'm sorry, just lost Alonzo. He's dead. We got 3 more pages. How's this kid gonna fuck up this whole farm? And you know what? He's not going to.
Yeah.
That's how. He's just gonna run away. And
yeah, I mean, I got to that final page. I read the ending of the ending, and I was like, oh well, fuck me. I didn't think he was gonna do that, but he definitely went there. So, yeah, it was interesting.
Other things worth mentioning: the family. I liked the family. I mean, I'm kind of glad that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is made in the synopsis, the reference to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because you can't read about a family of ghouls without, like, that's the one. That's the one that I think that's the one everybody points to whenever you do that. So, the good thing is that if you acknowledge it, then it's not nearly as egregious, right?
Yeah.
like the whole. I think back to House of a Thousand Corpses, right? And I mean, you couldn't get closer to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family than Rob Zombie did in that. Like, that's literally the playbook for Texas Chainsaw. The whole movie's the playbook for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But when you acknowledge it and say, I always loved this fucking movie, kind of makes it okay to delve into that particular realm.
Yeah, more of an inspiration than a ripoff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, like, so even early on, because at the very, like, chapter 3 or 4 or whatever, when you really get a good look at the father and uncle characters, it's obvious that they're not human. And so the supernatural stuff doesn't take long to be introduced, and it just gets weirder and weirder to the point where it takes that. I feel like that there's almost a point where, like, something shifts in stories like this to, like, Livius and me, we were talking before recording about Lovecraft, like the ancient evil type of thing, and Livius said cosmic horror, and I was like, yes, this is 100% cosmic horror, because there's something otherworldly that's trying to break through into this world, and that there's a shift. I think it's, when we start seeing what's going on at the farm, where it goes from there's some monsters doing monstrous shit to this is something that goes beyond our understanding of reality.
Yeah, I think that you can get up to that part maybe when Josh first walks into the house and everything's upside down and weird. Up until then, you can kind of buy the father and uncle are just looking to make skin masks.
Yep.
But that's where it really, you start going, wait, what the fuck is this? And I had to read that whole, I don't know, whatever paragraph or two over.
Yeah.
To kind of make sense of it. But yeah, that's when you start knowing that this is a much weirder, because up until then they could just be crazy inbred You know, like I
Yeah.
said, people who are trying to, make candles out of young boy fat or something, whatever weird thing, right? And you could buy that.
This episode sponsored by candles made by Young Boy Fat.
That's right. So, at any rate, yes, cosmic horror, and I think that was handled. So, the interesting part, to get back to the ending, is that we see the genesis of this, but we don't know any of the reasons, which is okay. So what I mean by that is we find out who Father is. So the initial person to be brought into this family is actually a friend of the sheriff's, a coworker of the sheriff's. And then we don't have an ending. Like, they're still out there, which in some ways like kind of changes the scope of the story. And I say that I don't need to sleep with lights on or whatever. I'm not that kind of person, right? But there's a different feeling when you finish a book and the evil has been beaten, and whatever that is, if that evil is a mob organization or a vampire or whatever, so you're like, oh, okay, the book's done, and you kind of sigh of relief, right? Like, you work through all this crazy shit that happened, but it's all over. I think the way he ended it leaves you a little unsettled, because I don't know exactly where Percy is, but I know Indiana's not that fucking far from here, right? And in the back of my mind, the evil wasn't only not defeated, even the elements of evil that were defeated were kind of resurrected, right? So the twins are brought back, but they're the Don and Shane characters versus whatever the original twins were. So there's something good about that from a storytelling standpoint that maybe not enough horror books do.
Yeah, and as you were saying that, it occurred to me that, like, I never thought about it until you were just saying all that you said, but this is not, like, it's more of a slice of life approach than it is like a full, like, beginning, middle, end story. Because, like you said, we don't really know why this started, and we don't have, like, the evil vanquished at the end, so this is just part of, this is absolutely a slice of the most horrible life, which is interesting, and it didn't really occur to me, but that's absolutely the way that it was written, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speculate. If I had to guess, I would guess that this is a one and done story.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's definitely there. Like, and because we're in spoiler talk, we could talk about this, right? It's definitely there for another story. It's Josh 6 years later, who has come back with a small team of people that are specialists in this kind of shit. You know what I mean? Like, there was enough left here to really expand the story if he was interested in doing it.
For sure. The only thing I think would be interesting to talk about, maybe and maybe not, is and this might just fall to we don't understand the rules of how things work, but, like, I was thinking about how the general idea is, so I want to see if I got this right. I want to make sure that we're on the same page about how the family shit works, because we find out that Richard had a partner who was it father or uncle?
It was father.
It was father, who got sick, and I'm doing, like, air quotes, and basically became possessed by whatever evil that father is, right?
Correct.
And then father basically said, you are helping me bring all of my family over from wherever they're coming from. So I'm on the right page, right?
Yes.
You're going to love this fucking question. So I was trying to reconcile that in my head because, so you've got the whole family is so far father, uncle, baby, the twins, and they're trying to bring out mother.
Right.
Now, if the format is bring someone to the farm and put part of the family in that body, how did they fucking abduct conjoined twins?
That's a really good question.
Right?
Yeah, because you'd imagine conjoined twins usually aren't just out and about, right? Like, it's not
like
it's
wandering down a road at night.
Yeah, it's a condition that doesn't lend itself to a lot of physical freedoms. That's a good point. And we don't know how it works. I love the question. I love the the thing. I mean, we don't know that they weren't purposely conjoined. Like, who's the old guy?
The old guy is Richard.
No, I'm talking about the old guy in the house. The
one
guy that feeds Josh the gross food. The one who saws off Uncle's head.
Yeah, that's Richard.
Okay, then maybe I'm confused.
Richard was the only person who was at the farm who wasn't one of the freaky people.
And Richard was
he's
Keen's
the one
friend?
He's the one that yeah. Yes.
Ooh. All right. Because I was under the impression that Keen's friend was the one that was sick and he ended up becoming father. I'm not under that impression. I am for sure that's what happened. Was Richard father? So was Richard father's original form? Was that his husband, lover, boyfriend, whatever?
No.
Okay.
Richard was dating the person who got sick.
Right. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
And Richard was not Keen's friend. The guy who became father was Keen's friend. Because he goes through that whole thing of saying he never got along with that guy's boyfriend, but they tolerated each other. And then he came to his house and said that his friend was sick. All right, so we're on the same page.
We're on the same page. Yeah, that's my confusion was I couldn't remember if it was father or uncle that was dating Richard.
Yeah, it was definitely father. They never explained where uncle came from, but that's the old guy. Okay, so that straightens that out in my head a little bit. That the old guy was.
The people listening are like, "Shut the fuck up already."
Yeah, no shit. At any rate, but even that little thing, right? So there's one normal human guy that's there of his own volition, and is just it's an interesting touch. I mean, it's what really rounds out stories. Somebody else could have taken the frame. Somebody else could listen to this podcast and say, well, I'll write that fucking story, right? But if you don't hit all the notes, if you don't have the human guy, if you don't have this hint at what started it, you decide to expose the whole thing, you have a completely different story. And I'm not saying it couldn't be better, right? But it could be a lot worse. I mean, I like the way this was delivered.
Yeah. I think that, and then something that I didn't really, and I might try and vocalize this a little bit in my wrap up, is the arcs of the parents from the beginning of the story to what happens at the end, because Otessa on paper is just a piece of shit. Like she even acknowledges in her own internal monologue that people just think of her as trashy. So she even knows how like low she is in people's opinion, but she's like the warrior in the story. She never gives up, and she is single-minded in getting her kid. So she goes from being probably one of the least redeemable characters to the person who does the most and sacrifices the most to fight evil, I guess. And then Mary separately goes from being a very meek person to definitely way less meek by the end of the story. I don't think it's as extreme, but like she definitely she goes like full like mama bear as well. And so I thought that was a really good arc as well.
Yeah, and I mean, and I'm glad he did that, because I think that's probably fair and consistent with most mothers, right?
Yep.
That that's the one thing. You can do a lot, and any human will put up with a lot, right? But women will put up with a lot, typically until it comes to their kids, and hopefully only, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because it can go the other way too, I guess. But yeah, no, the moms I think were fine. Like I said, Otessa, I mean, Otessa felt like a caricature, which is what bothered me.
Yeah, I could see why you would say that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I said. Like sometimes it works well, and sometimes it doesn't. And she's probably the character I most struggle with in this, on deciding if I like her or not. And that's why, because there are definitely elements I like. And I understand that she's presented in a way as to be a little abrasive or grating or whatever. But I almost feel like she may be a little overdone.
Yeah.
So
that's fair. Yep. But fuck, man.
Yeah.
I want to say, I forgot to mention it earlier, but I looked, and as far as I can tell from looking at maps, Percy, Indiana does not exist. It's a made-up town, so you can sleep well tonight, because there's no weird monster cops out there, as far as we're aware.
Really, I'm surprised it doesn't exist.
I mean, I looked. There's I think there's a Percy, Illinois. But I'm going to my maps right now. Percy, Indiana. Nothing. There's a Percy Street in
there's a
Missouri town.
Percy Junction, Indiana. Yeah.
Now, I mean, here's what I'll say. Knowing Indiana as much as I do, it's not that far off. Like, it's like, even down to, I got the feeling that this was a small town that only existed because of its, proximity to a highway. Like, that's the only reason people started to gather in a town like shape, which is very Indiana. So
yeah, well, and it's got to be so whatever town it's based on or whatever. I mean, it's a fictional town. If it's based on a town, it can't be too far from Chicago, because Chicago comes up way too much.
Yeah.
So it's probably closer to Chicago than it is to Indianapolis, or that would be where the kids think about going, or you know what I mean. It's got to be an Illinois, closer to the Illinois border.
And honestly, if you think about it, there's a very infamous town in Northwest Indiana with a male name, Gary. So.
Oh.
That's where the Jacksons are from, right? Michael Jackson and shit.
I believe that's true. Yes, Gary, Indiana. I don't know. I mean, we'll have Max on, so I'm sure he'll.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can get him to. We can pressure him for some. We want answers. I want to know what town I shouldn't drive through.
And then we find out it's a Mandela effect, and it's like really freaky. Like there was a Percy, Indiana, in another timeline.
All right. Well, I think we can cut it here, right, for spoiler talk.
I'm good.
All right. So thank you, patrons, as always, for supporting this podcast. We appreciate everything you guys do for us. Come back in probably a couple weeks. I don't know what's on the radar. Probably not another spoiler talk till July, though. Thanks.